So, as stated here, our dialogue between the Korean civil society and the Japanese civil society started since 2016. First year, it was just after the adoption of the SDGs. We had a side events at the high-level political forum in New York. And after that, in the next year, we also had a side event at New York. And in 2018, we had this dialogue in Korea, Seoul, as a Korea-Japan CSO roundtable on SDGs. Last year, 2019, International Dialogue on Civic Space and SDGs, we held it Tokyo, Japan. And this year, we are so glad to have a side event at high-level political forum as online. So we are so glad to have this dialogue between Japanese and Korean civil societies. And we are, every year we have deepened our discussion, focusing on every year on SDGs goals 16 and 17. And this year we are glad to have this dialogue again as a side event of high-level political forum. So let's move to the first session. This side event is separated into session 1 and session 2. And in this first session, we will deepen our discussion among CSO members. Two major groups in each country will share experiences, good practices, and challenges on COVID-19 and SDGs. And also, we welcome Global CSO. She will share its lessons learned. So, first speaker is from South Korea, Ms. Hee-jin Kim, project manager from Mirror Welfare Foundation. She will share her experience from the viewpoint of gender and refugees. So Hee-jin, over to you.
Hi, I'm Hee-jin Kim from South Korea. I work at the Mirror Welfare Foundation. Let's the first presentation I will play. Yes. It is a great honor to be here in front of you. I'm working at the Mirror Welfare Foundation Lebanon branch for the humanitarian aid to Syrian refugees in Lebanon. The Lebanon branch mainly focuses on working on 3 projects for the last 5 years. One is the education project for Syrian refugee children. We established a school for primary education in 2015. The Lebanon branch runs the primary school and manages local teachers and staffs by training. Another project is physiotherapy for the disabled and widows. The last project is related to the lively support for Syrian widows and the other people who are hard to work for or live because to physical disabilities. In these years, around 1 million Syrian refugees live in Lebanon. Syrian refugees have trouble with debt, children labor, early marriage, and low-income jobs. Other many international NGOs in Lebanon, including the UN, help them. The refugees suffer from the several hardships of their life. Lebanese General mobilization by COVID-19 restricted the social gathering and economy activities and constrained to shut down schools, public institutions, companies, and most of shops, including restaurants, cafes, and movie theaters. Lebanese government forced to close the refugee camps and tightly restricted the refugees' activities for prevent the spread of COVID-19. They could not go outside of the camp to work and to buy necessaries such as food. Also, the regulations influenced the refugees support at the refugee campus. Only medical NGOs were around to work at the campus. The restrictions over Syrian activities because to make the financial status of the refugees worse. As cheap laborers in Lebanon, Syrian people are not protected by the law and are not treated fairly by the employees. Syrian laborers do not earn enough money to live their daily life. Furthermore, most of Syrians have lost their jobs since COVID-19. Consequently, they lost jobs and became hard to get support from NGOs. The pandemic situation makes their life harder to survive as refugees in Lebanon. On the 1 of July, Lebanese lifted most of the restrictions by COVID-19. However, the school cannot reopen until October. Although the social and economic activities were resumed, Syrian refugees have been hard to return to work. They live in debt and extreme poverty. Middle Welfare Foundation offers education support for Syrian children and livelihood support for Syrian refugees. We support the refugees' children's online class by creating the video for online teaching, material and giving daily homework. Teachers send the content for their online class to parents through mobile message. During weekdays, the video helps students study and do their homeworks at home. Students submit their daily homework to teachers after studying. Teachers manage their students under the system since COVID-19. We investigated to understand the Syrian refugee situation at the refugee campus during the pandemic. We discussed the more difficulty of refugees' life since the COVID-19. Most refugees have a hard time finding enough food and other necessaries because of depreciations of the Lebanese lira and high inflations and high unemployment in Lebanon. So we prepared a food package to distribute for 1,002 million families. But only medical NGOs can enter the refugee campus during the pandemic since COVID-19. Other NGOs have forbidden to enter the campus. We asked the partnership with multilateral agency. We couldn't enter the refugee campus with the local official. We have a plan for supporting food and education kits to the Syrian refugees in August and October. The Lebanese government controls COVID-19 by the Ministry of Health. The Lebanese government has locked down the city in 5 stages from March to June because it does not have COVID-19 protections. The Ministry of Health official announced the new number of COVID-19 cases every 24 hours. Last May, confirmed case by COVID-19 in a Syrian refugee camp. The Lebanese government has been locked down the refugee camp and the number confirmed and death case in a refugee camp. NGOs are distributing mask, hand gel, hygiene kit to Syrian refugees and Lebanese. I suggested 3 things to the South Korean government. South Korean government will make a response plan for refugees on post-COVID-19. The South Korea government solves the problem of refugees with the international government and funding for refugees and keeping work with the NGOs. Second, South Korean government has a flexible accounting rule. Lebanese host country and underdeveloped national has not good economic and banking system. So we need a flexible accounting system suitable for cities in underdeveloped countries. Last, the world tended to support for refugees more. The world tends to support more refugees and migrants. So the South Korean government should also budget increase for refugee support. Okay, I finished my presentation. Thank you for listening to the Mira Raphael Foundation presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Hijin. I missed to inform that Hijin is now stationed in Lebanon, and then she is connected from Lebanon. Thank you very much, Hijin, sharing your experience from the field. So,
thank you.
Thank you. So we will discuss in the discussion session. So second speaker, I would like to welcome the speaker from South Korea as well. From the major group of disabilities, Ms. Rena Lee, Secretary General of Korea Disability Forum, will share her experience in Korea, South Korea. Rena, over to you. Thank you.
Hi, nice to see you or hear you through the online, and then thank you very much for the organizer to prepare this very valuable meeting. Right, as a limited time, I'll just make my presentation brief. COVID-19 was not only a threat to disabled people. However, it was a lot harder for people with disabilities whose daily living needed to be supported. To begin with my presentation, I would like to share the very first slide, and then I will ask you to read out the sentences. Let me see for the screen. Right. To begin with my presentation, hold on, I can't see my slide yet. So when we are quite tired of the self-quarantine or social distancing, we were really hoping for the COVID-19 end. However, actually that hits me to think of persons with disabilities who live in that kind of isolation all the time. And then within the international community, this sentence has run around. So I would like you to kind of read out. So even if the COVID-19 ends, when everybody else can go back to kind of ordinary life, but some of the people with disabilities who live in an institution, they have to continue their isolation. So for persons with disabilities, of course, the situation was harder. As you know, compared to other countries, Korea, together with the government's initiatives and the very supportive participation by the citizens, we managed the quite good control without like shutting down the border or shut down the workplaces or shops. We continued to work into the workplaces, and also we still went out, although we kind of avoided further big groups. But even in that situation, we found anyway the situation is more vulnerable for the people with disabilities. And then let me share with you very first thing. When anything happens, anyway, we need information so that I know what to do as the next. However, like there was no accessible information. So when our government started our briefing session, actually there was no sign language interpretation in the first place. And then Korean disability community, deaf community included, they made a strong recommendation to put sign language. So that since then, all the official briefing news provided the sign language. However, when they called like a hotline, COVID-19 hotline, there was no like what's it called, the TRS service, or when they went to the screening center or screening clinic, then there were no sign language interpreters available. So that was quite hard for people with hearing impairment to follow all this step. And there are other groups who actually have some difficulty in reading ordinary documents. And then some of you might know or might be aware of the easy read version. That is kind of a document with a simple language and then with a very brief content, so that people with learning disabilities or autism can understand easily. However, those materials were not ready either. So Daegu, the city Daegu was one of the most badly affected city. So the disability organization in Daegu, they actually applied for fund, and then they made this easy read version on COVID-19. Through this good initiative, later on, the government actually published the easy version of COVID-19. So information is quite important for all group of people to be aware of what is happening now and how to protect myself. And the second concern was, I mean, probably for Japan and then for other countries, already the government has made the disability inclusive disaster management guidance. However, it wasn't ready in South Korea, but already back in 2015, when MERS outbroke in South Korea, already the disability community found actually there was no proper disability inclusive guidance. So we made the request to the government and then actually filed the court, and then the court made the mediation. However, that guidance was not available until this group of people faced again the COVID-19. But luckily, and together with through the partnership with the relevant professionals and then CSOs, the disability inclusive response was published, I think, 2 weeks ago. However, that you can see the photo that the Korean disability community made a press conference to urging the guidance. And then another point was the residential home setting. For whatever reason, anyway, some of the people moved into the residential homes, but as OHCHR assessed in their guidance, actually by the nature of institution, it is a lot more dangerous for people to get infected, and then those communicative disease can be spread. So in European countries, when actually COVID-19 outbroke, they were advised to send those people back to the community with the proper services. However, in Korea, that was not in the case, but like cohort isolation was taken by the government as a measurement. Or even like some people who live in the community, but when the person was advised to be in self-quarantine, but then the person could not receive like a personal assistance service or other like community-based services, then the person have to move into other kind of a temporary like a residential like home. So that was kind of against the international standard. So that concerns us quite a lot. So Korean disability community asked the government actually to push forward the deinstitutionalization plan through this pandemic. What else? And the next one, right? Yeah, this is another difficult stories. I mean, in order to kind of control the spread of COVID-19, we all advised to not to go into the big group meeting and places. But when you think about people with disabilities who need kinds of daily support or structure in their daily life with certain programs, or even with the like rehabilitation programs, but those community-based centers shut down or they suspended the program. So then the caring for them were left to the family wholly. So when the school stopped and then all those centers stopped, I mean, sadly, 2 families made commit suicide because of the burden of caring. So that was quite tragic incident. So, I mean, despite the danger of COVID-19, the government have to think about the alternative services instead of leaving them only solely onto the family. So that was the concern. So, of course, the government didn't do nothing. They kind of increased some special budget to increase the personal assistance service. So that like some people who have to in self-quarantine, then they could receive more services. However, when we had the overall supplementary budget, unlike other sectors where their whole budget has been increased, the disability area, actually the general budget cut down. So that raised quite big concern into Korean disability community. However, with all these difficult situations, the CSOs and the government and all other staff, they work hard to support people with a disability, either in the community or in institutions. So when the government, before the government made the guidance available, actually disability organization in Daegu City, they made the guidance because they had to struggle with all those daily situations where disabled people were isolated in their homes, but no services available, or when they had to be hospitalized because medical staff are not well aware of disability issues, or they can't really meet the individual needs. So luckily the disability organization, they drafted kind of a guideline. I mean, 12 organizations, they made those guidelines. And also before those guidance are available, because we were greatly concerned about the staff and the people with disability in institutions. So KDF translated even some manuals in Hong Kong so that we shared those materials to other staff in institutions. And also many the disability organization, they did fundraising to buy masks and this antiseptic gels to send to Daegu City, which was adversely hit by COVID-19. So that kind of support work has taken place. And I mean, this was a quite emotional thing for me to watch, actually, when the COVID-19 was quite strong in Daegu City. Although there was money available for personal assistance to go in, not many workers actually are willing to go into the disabled person's homes and then to support. In that situation, the staff in the disability organizations, they were fully dressed with this protective clothes, and then they went into the disabled person's homes to support that person's daily routines. Right, so this is the photos, like you can see this protective clothes. They are not medical professionals, but kind of ordinary workers like us.
Lina,
Okay.
Lina, sorry,
time
has already passed. So could you please wrap up?
Right.
Yeah,
just
it's very interesting.
Last ending. Yeah, we have work closely with the government, but my suggestion is that, I mean, there are various group of people, but like in Japan, when the SDG, the CSO platform is officially established, then it will be greatly helpful for us to share these concerns and then kind of developing strategy and plans. Okay, thank you very much to listen to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very profound experience sharing, and thank you very much. And then sorry that we cannot offer a lot of time. Thank you. Yeah, now we would like to welcome the third speaker from Japan. From the major group of youth, Ms. Haruna Kuraishi, Secretary General of Japan Youth Platform for Sustainability, JIPS, will share her experience of youth, especially in Japan. So Haruna, over to you.
Okay, good afternoon, morning, audience around the world, colleagues, speakers, and more. My name is Haruna Kuraishi from Japan Youth Platform for Sustainability, our youth-led advocacy platform in Japan. Thank you for inviting me to the floor of this side event. Today, I am here to talk about what youth are facing right now due to the pandemic first. Then I would like to share some of my ideas about how the governance framework should be established or improved for better engagement to SDGs of youth. Before sharing the situations and my ideas, please take a moment to look at these quotes from youth in Japan. Those are in difficult situation to get sustainable education or to maintain sustainable income and employment. Here are some examples of the impacts of COVID-19 on youth during the pandemic. Health concerns are, of course, serious, especially in terms of the health of so-called unpaid doctors in Japan. And the problem that many students are slugging over are concerns about education and job security. Furthermore, currently, there is a growing number of young people aged 20 to 30 who are infected by COVID-19. Some criticize this situation by attributing its cause to young workers who offer nightlife services, especially bars and clubs, because they run their business continuously. To tackle these issues, both national and local governments have taken measures which include some points listed on this slide, such as granting financial aid to students, asking young workers in nightclub to take the business suspension, and asking them to take COVID-19 test. However, people, including youth, who are concerned about COVID-19 and its impacts, are not invited to the government novel coronavirus expert meetings or other relevant meetings, which are very vital in solving the pandemic and following difficulties. This exclusion of youth from these meetings or something like some meetings is against the principles of governance on SDGs in terms of inclusiveness, democracy, and transparency. Then what can be improved in the context of youth engagement and participation in advocacy? I think one element that is becoming more clear than before is that youth voices are diverse. This means that each youth has different backgrounds, needs, knowledge, and skills, which should be respected individually. Furthermore, even though advocacy engagement is mainly driven by educated elites in the civil society of Japan, I suppose, this engagement should be open for not only experts, but also vulnerable people, because they are the most affected by the pandemic. Thus, I would like to suggest my ideas of good governance in a civil society, which is not only integration but also inclusion, in order to promote youth engagement and participation in advocacy. It is not only necessary to make people realize the importance of youth in advocacy engagement, but it is also essential that youth voices must be reflected all policy areas by improving decision-making process in Japan. This framework will ensure solidarity among youth and also with other stakeholders. In coping with these struggles against the COVID-19 pandemic and its severe impacts, the ideas of SDGs are significant in taking effective measures to vulnerable people and involving youth voices in the government decision-making processes. For example, one of the major groups in the United Nations, UNMCY, United Nations Major Group of Children and Youth, is so essential framework that youth and children can engage in social issues and state their opinion to the society or global society. That's finished my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Haruna-san. Very time-conscious speech. Thank you very much. So, thank you for your experience on the youth groups and good suggestion and recommendation from the viewpoint of the youth. So, we would like to welcome to the other speaker, fourth speaker from Japan as well, from the major group of gender, Ms. Fumie Saito, Global Advocacy Manager of JOICEF, Japanese Organization for International Cooperation in Family Planning, JOICEF. So she will share her experience in Japan as well. So Fumie-san, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Noriko. Hi, my name is Fumie Saito, as Noriko introduced me, and as Joseph is a co-convener of a gender unit of Japan SDGs Japan, I'd like to speak about impact of COVID-19 on women and girls today. Let me make it slideshow now. Yes. So impact of COVID-19 on women and girls appears in different issues in Japan, and I believe those problem is kind of similar in other settings too, in other countries too. Women suffer from the double burden of paid and unpaid work due to school closure. Single parents are most affected. 60% of single mothers experience reduced income. 18 lost employment. There is a sharp increase of domestic violence. Government hotline received 4,400 calls a month. Counseling support demand increased by 30%. Government cash payment did not always reach the most vulnerable, as the head of household received cash payments for all other family members. Like other countries, 70% of healthcare workers are women. They face double burden work and discrimination against them and their children. Of course, sexual and reproductive health and rights matters. Increased teenage pregnancy, limited access to emergency contraceptives, increased concerns of pregnant women. So CSOs raised their voices, and to some issues, government responded. On the issue of single parents, an NGO conducted a survey to request more support from the government. Government responded by providing stipend. On the issue of domestic violence, there's at the very early stage, NGO network presented a petition to the government, and the government responded by setting up a domestic violence plus hotline in mid-April, and shortly after make it available in 10 languages. On the issue of cash payment, several NGOs alerted the government that DV survivors could not get a stipend. So several MPs picked up the issue at the parliament, and the government responded by making special arrangements. And when I talk about this issue, actually at a different panel, and then one Malaysian woman said they have similar issues on the cash payment too. I think they're well responded by the government, especially by the Gender Equality Bureau. However, these measures are rather reactive. Should it be preemptive to prevent those issues? In fact, COVID-19 intensified existing inequalities. We need to tackle the root causes. Gender issues under the COVID crisis did not effectively resonate with society. We need to raise awareness among policymakers and the media. So what can be improved? Gender should be incorporated in COVID-19 response from the beginning. The consultation have to be made with civil society. At least we have 30% representation of women in the cabinet and expert panel of COVID-19. Currently, we have 3 out of 20 members in the cabinet and 2 out of 12 members in the expert panel. We have to at least double the numbers. And of course, we have to strengthen the Gender Equality Bureau within government so that the responses could be shared by the whole government. There are ample good resources for incorporating gender perspectives. The two from United Nations, and I'd like to highlight the bottom one, that is a joint press statement which is endorsed by the 59 countries, and including Japan and Republic Korea, South Korea. And both government endorsed this protecting sexual and reproductive health and rights and promoting gender responsiveness in the COVID-19 crisis. So I'd say there are many opportunities. Internationally, this year is the Beijing Plus 25, which is 25th anniversary of Fourth World Conference on Women. And domestically in Japan, this year is the revision of the Gender Equality Basic Plan. So using these opportunities, we can have multi-stakeholder consultations, and the outcome and the system of the multi-stakeholder consultations, we can use it for the future pandemics. So I hope in the future, gender issues will be well addressed. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Fumi, for sharing your experience in the field of gender. It's really good to hear that government has also responded very actively, and also your recommendation is very precisely. Thank you very much. So finally, we would like to welcome the final speaker from the Global South. Now we have heard the experiences, 2 speakers from Korea and 2 speakers from Japan. So now we would like to ask the global CSOs as a speaker to share her experience or thoughts from the viewpoint of global CSO. Ms. Becky Malay, co-chair of Global Call for Action Poverty, namely GCAP. So she will share thoughts after listening to the presentations from 4 speakers. So welcome, Becky. Please share your comments. Sorry, we do not have enough time, so within 5 minutes. Over to you, Becky.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Noriko. It's good to see everyone. So I'd like to greet everyone a good day, good evening, good morning, whatever your time is in. And I'd like to go straight to my presentation. Please go to the page, next page, please. We're looking here at a pandemic that has happened, and actually we're looking at some of the questions to ask of the government and the CSOs to strengthen partnerships, which is in the SDG 17. These are the means of implementation. No? So we're looking at, next slide. I'd like to go back to what we had in the People's Assembly in September 2019 at the General Assembly in New York. The situation of poverty is that 730 million are still living in extreme poverty since last year. Now, this is last year. 1.1 billion have no access to electricity. 2.7 billion do not have access to clean cooking facilities. More than 820 million go hungry every day. And more than 260 million people across the world suffer daily from exclusion and discrimination because of their ethnicity and their work. No? So this is the situation. And then came the pandemic. Next slide. Because of the pandemic, the projections made by by the United Nations University Institute says that about 400 to 580 million will be added to the list of people who are going to experience poverty, and at different levels, no? So extreme poverty in some cases. So we are actually set back by 10 years in terms of poverty alleviation efforts that started 30 years ago. So this is the very grim and reality, the global picture. No? The unemployment all over the world is going to be very, very high still. In the Philippines alone, we have 7.3 million already unemployed, no, because of this. So there also, we'll push, next slide, we're pushing actually for a lot of social protection measures. But when we migrate to to digital platforms to distribute cash benefits, cash transfers. We have to move to digital means that actually put us in a lot of risk in terms of surveillance, in terms of phishing, in terms of privacy issues. So it is a human rights free zone, when you get into a totally digital welfare. When the government gets in this kinds of platform, it is not regulated. So we have to move for the regulation of this privately owned digital platforms. No? So these are very important issues to look at. Next slide. We're looking at the role of government. So SDGs actually provide the framework for the government to implement a sustainable development plan. But the pandemic is a major disruption in the old normal. No? So in the old normal, we already are saying that it requires a whole of society and whole of government approach. What more in a pandemic? It requires more than that. No? Because this is a contingency that government has to plan for, and it's quick response that is needed. Next slide. By the very nature of the emergency, the spread is viral, government must plan the response. And I think the most important thing is that for governments to realize that this is a health issue, and facts, data, science should be able to guide the responses, no? So for it to be effective. And then government must use all its structures to reach out to the poorest and design the most inclusive policies, because the pandemic will require the bridging the gap that is already there in terms of inequalities. The pandemic actually exposed all the inequalities that are already there, but made it worse. No? So people are experiencing gaps in income. So you have experiences of inequalities because of your location. Whether you live in the rural or the urban area, you get a differentiated kind of set of services. No? So these are very important. So for example, students are out of school now, almost 100%, because schools are closed in many poor countries. So it is a problem of connectivity, but we don't have access to internet all over the place. So this is important. So I'm pointing out all of these things because these are important responses that the government should be designing for. No? So let's go to the role of civil society. CSOs are present in most communities. Next slide. They can identify who are left behind because they're in communities they know. And then second, they can deliver the services. They can act as conduits for government. They can provide information. They can actually do WASH. They can do mapping of roads and infrastructure. They can do all this. And then CSOs can be mobilizers. They can deploy volunteers for contact tracing, for example. Monitors, CSOs can be monitors for accountability. We are very effective in monitoring the government, but the government needs to open up the information. There has to be freedom of information. Huh? So we can identify the gaps. We can identify where the funds are being used only if the government will share the information. So it takes two. No? So CSOs can also act as policy advisors. Knowing all of this and being able to network, no, from local to national to regional to global, we can be advisors to the government. We have been doing this in the Philippines. We have regular webinars with multi-stakeholders on various issues. For example, we just finished a webinar series on rural development and food security this morning. So these are dialogues that we do with the legislators and government officials. No? Next slide. So how can CSOs build effective partnership between government in terms of preventing the next pandemic? So it's hard to see how and when are we going to get out of this pandemic, but let's look at the future by acting on the present. CSOs, as I said, can play many roles, but I think it's important to make them listen to us, and then let them see the interlinkages between the SDGs, because let's not forget how they all they're linked. No? And then last but not least, last slide, No. I just want to say in this previous slide that in GCAP, there are a lot of interventions that the CSOs, national coalitions, have applied. For example, India has helped the government identify the migrants, the interstate migrants on food rations. The people discriminated by work and descent developed an app to identify migrant workers. And then Pakistan did a lot of assistance to fill out the welfare forms. Okay, so these are examples. Last slide, please. What is the policy framework that we need? Obviously, the most important one is to adopt a human rights-based approach. We have to have a clear understanding of the impacts of COVID on the poorest and most marginalized. We have to be inclusive, as the examples of Japan and Korea have shown. No? But let us not forget that the priority should be women, because women are the most affected here. Whether there's intersections between the inequalities that they experience, it's always women who have the heaviest bundle. And then it must be clear also that we should focus on the other interrelated SDGs. So thank you.
Thank you, Becky, for clear-cut summary. So it's almost time, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. We have heard experiences from 4 speakers from Korea and Japan, and summarizing comment from global CSO speaker. Their speeches really enlightened the difficult situation of people left behind by the impact of pandemic. But at the same time, CSO's efforts and possibility for not leaving these people behind. So in the next session 2, we would like to deepen our dialogue, how to deepen the partnership between government and CSOs based on the speeches in this session 1. Finally, please appreciate 5 wonderful speakers. Thank you very much for your wonderful speech. Thank you.